Loved ones, today is Management 3130, session 21. If we were together, it would be 20 July 20. That would be our class meeting date, if indeed we're meeting together. I don't have any admin things to share with you. Today's chapter is a discussion of communication, and the truth is, I want you to recognize that a lot of the content in this chapter has a much bigger impact than your grade in Management 3130. A lot of the things that are talked about in this chapter on communications are really life skills. So I really hope that you see the value in that and that you grab a hold of it and try to adopt a lot of these things. So before I get into actual chapter 15, I want to talk to you about the mask mandate. Today is 14 July. Yesterday, on 13 July, we got an email, those of us at the university, that said masks are going to be required as of 15 July, and apparently the email suggested that there would be punishment for those of us who misbehave. Oh dear. So, the truth is, there's a legitimate question about the authority. I say that because Governor Kemp issued an executive order, and he was given the power to do that by the Georgia General Assembly. And his executive order says explicitly, unambiguously, that no political subdivision or municipality can develop its own standards if they conflict with what's in the executive order. But somebody here was all full of himself or herself, and we'll see how that plays out. But the point is that right now, masks are required as of tomorrow. Oh dear. And a lot of people use paper masks or cloth masks. And one of my objections about this masking thing is so straightforward. This is science. This is an opinion. If you put on a mask and you can breathe in or out, you can inhale germs and you can exhale germs. The mask does nothing. So, being a man who values preparedness, I have a gas mask that is issued to the Israeli army. You can buy these things new from surplus stores for $20. And of course, it has a really good shield in the sense that it forms a great seal. This canister has a filter in it, so this would actually filter out stuff. You're not just sucking in air, it actually filters out stuff. And the only problem is it compromises my ability to speak carefully. So we'll have to see. Now, so this mask is reusable and it's very, very effective. But this isn't a silly prop. The Norton family has one mask for every adult member of our household in our home under our beds. And we do that not because we're goofy and we're worried about people throwing in smoke grenades or crap like that, but in most structure fires, people are killed by smoke inhalation. They simply can't breathe. They asphyxiate long before they're cooked. So to the extent that you have any sort of an effective, viable mask that's quickly accessible to you, not only can you evacuate safely and not run the risk of falling over because you can't breathe, but you can also assist other people that are less capable or in some way impaired. So the truth is that the Norton family has these, as I said, we buy these from military surplus stores, brand new, $20. This canister still has a tap on it to open it. This little thing, when I pull it, it is then effective, but I have no reason to do that until I use it. So I just want you to know, though, that we keep those masks in our home as a preventative measure in the event that there's ever a structure fire. We will get out, and we will get others out if need be. So, let's talk about chapter 15 on communications. Definitionally, I'm on 582 right now. The definition of communication is pretty straightforward. It's the transfer of information. No surprise there. But it won't surprise you to hear that there are lots of mediums, a lot of communication channels that you can use used to transfer information. And then almost immediately, the authors talk about the components of the communication process, and there are three essentially: the sender, the receiver, and the feedback. Now, the sender does two things. The sender encodes a message. I decide what I want to say, and I encode it, whether this is a writing, whether I'm banging on a keyboard, whether I'm speaking, but I decide on a message and I encode it. I reduce it to something that I can then transmit. I can send it to your mobile phone, I can email you, I can speak to you, I can get an airplane to skywrite or whatever it is that I'm going to do. So the sender encodes a message and transmits it. She or he does those two things. The receiver, unsurprisingly, receives the message and decodes it. Now, I have a question that the textbook doesn't raise at this point in the discussion. Is it possible, as a sender, that I could have a particular intent? I could encode a message, and I intend to deliver a particular message to you, but if I did it poorly, is it possible that when you decode it, your interpretation is not what I intended? Well, heck yes! Happens on a regular basis, doesn't it? We may intend to send a message with something that carries a particular intent. We have a particular objective in mind. But if we do a poor job of encoding it, then the receiver may very well decode it and think, my gosh, this is ugly, or whatever, or it doesn't answer the question, or whatever the outcomes of that are. So this notion about messages that don't fulfill the intended purpose is a pretty big one. And then the third thing that they talk about in this process is feedback. And when they say feedback, they're really talking about anything that helps the receiver establish clarity. It's very, very common, for example, in radio transmissions in the military, for someone to send a message, and the receiver's response, if she or he understands it, will say, Roger. That explicitly means I've received the message and I understand it. What if it's garbled? What if it's incomplete? And then, of course, there's a related thing, and that is that in the military, there's a very common term, will go, and it's a truncation of will comply. But you all see all these movies, and everybody says, copy that. Stop it. Nobody in the military says, copy that. That's what Hollywood morons think people in the military do. But since none of them have ever served, they're speculating. They're having fantasies. Yes. And they probably wear adult diapers. I don't know. So here's another component of the communication process. And sadly, this is very legitimate. That component is noise. Noise is any signal that is transmitted that doesn't have any value. It just clutters the channel. Here's an example of noise, and I see this often, and it doesn't distress me, but it shouldn't happen. I have students, and you have friends, who use the word like 7 times a second, and it doesn't add any value. I actually had a situation in one of our classrooms a year or two ago. A student was answering a question, and after a few seconds, I asked her to stop, because her answer was, well, like I said this, and like she said that, like I said this, and that, and like, and whatever. And I said, okay, please stop. I've reached the point where I'm no longer listening to your answer. I'm simply counting the number of times that you say like. So please stop, reflect on a response, and when you're ready, make the contribution. So noise is clutter. It's anything in the channel that doesn't add any value. And I think that's actually this overuse of like is fairly common. And then the last thing that they talk about that is a component of communication is jargon. And what they tell us to do clearly is avoid it, because jargon is always unclear except to some tiny in-group. If you listen to anyone in the military, they will quickly devolve to jargon. And what they often use acronyms or pseudo-acronyms. If you listen to CPAs, they'll talk about all sorts of things that the IRS does. TFA 86, or TRA 86, the Tax Recovery Act of 1986. There are types of depreciation, ACRS, accelerated cost recovery method, or system rather. So it's very, very common in group, in your tiny little group of knowledgeable people, to use jargons. These are shortcuts. They are incomplete and they're unclear to anybody outside of your group. So please make an effort not to use jargon. So those are the way the authors present it. They present those 5 components of communication process: sender, receiver, feedback, noise, and jargon. And jargon is simply an admonishment to not do it. Now, I'm on 586, and there is a really important subject that comes up at this part of the chapter. And that answers a question. If I wish to send a message, what channel will I use? What specific medium? Will I put it on a bulletin board here in the hallway of the Parker College? Will I make a post to my Instagram account? Of course, I have lots of them. I do fashion chips and microblading and makeup stuff, and I have lots of Instagram channels. Yes, I certainly do. What medium will I choose? So here's the reality. The nature of the message will always, or should always, dictate the choice of medium. What channel will I use? That'll be driven by the nature of the message. And I want to put something on the board that I think will help with this part of our conversation. So we're going to call this, because the literature does, we're going to call this media richness. And I'm going to put a continuum up here. So, a continuum is just a model that has 2 clear anchor points. It does not go beyond these 2 anchor points. On the left side of this board, it says bulletin board, and that suggests the least rich channel. If you put a message on the bulletin board behind me in the hallway of the Parker College, can I walk by it without looking? Can I walk by it and glance at it and say stupid or irrelevant? Can I read part of it and say, no, I'm not interested in whatever the message starts to tell me about? So bulletin boards are incredibly ineffective ways to deliver messages, and yet Facebook has, 2 billion people with active accounts on it? Facebook is a bulletin board, isn't it? It's an electronic one. But people just post dumb stuff, and people scroll through every day and go by hundreds or thousands of messages without reading them or acknowledging them. So bulletin board is the least rich of any medium, any channel that we choose to deliver a message, because there's the high potential that it won't be received or read or acknowledged or acted upon. So bulletin boards are the least rich choice of a channel. Face-to-face is by far the most rich. And if you think about what I said a moment ago, it is the nature of the message that dictates the choice. I'm going to scare the crap out of somebody in this class. Okay, Rachel Cox, I love you. I do, because I'll put your needs ahead of mine. But I want to role play. I want to do something with Rachel Cox, who's one of our high-speed students. And let's assume that I'm 21, 22 years old, and I meet Rachel, and I'm moonstruck. I can't live another day without this woman. So I decide that I want to propose marriage to Rachel. Pretty important message. Would I propose marriage face-to-face, or would I stick a note on Facebook or the bulletin board of the hallway? It is the nature of the message that often dictates which channel we use. So my point is that face-to-face is perfect in terms of its synchronicity. We see each other's everything. We see facial expressions, eye movement. We hear tonal qualities in the voice. We can immediately ask questions or respond or whatever. So this is perfect in terms of it being a synchronized message. Now, bulletin board has almost no potential to even deliver a message. So what I want to talk about are other asynchronous types where we don't interact in real time. That's the key. In a face-to-face message, we are interacting in real time. We see each other, hear each other, whatever the case may be. So, asynchronous messages can take a lot of forms. Here is a letter. If I'm the sender, I encode a message and I transmit it to you via a letter. It goes in the mail, it's delivered. You may get it 3 days later, you may not read it immediately. It may be a week or 10 days before you have a chance to respond to it. I've delivered a message, and you can respond, can't you? You can send me a letter back. But my point is that is simply an asynchronous form of delivering a message. And the reason I'm putting this continuum here is I want you to see that we have different timelines. So how about if I sent you an email? I've chosen a digital platform instead of me writing something on a piece of paper and mailing it to you. And the digital platform means that when I hit send, it's in your inbox. Now, you may not open email for a few hours. And if you do, you may scroll through whomever the senders are and what the subject line says and that sort of stuff. But the point is that emails are much, much faster to both send and to respond, send, receive, and respond to. And emails sometimes imply urgency. Letters rarely do. Letters are thoughtful and deliberative, and they don't usually require an immediate response. Now, the virtue of using either of these channels, either sending a letter or sending an email, is that it's a written record. You have documentation of what you said and when you said it. And that's a pretty big deal sometimes. So, now, so far, these are asynchronous, right? If I'm the sender, I send you an email and I don't know when you're going to read it. If I'm the sender and I mail a letter, I don't know when you're going to read it. So we're not, our activities are not synchronized. They're not happening at the same time. So here's an example of something that is not asynchronous. What if you and I have a phone conversation? Doesn't that take place in real time? Can I ask you questions? Can I hear something in your voice that suggests that you're unclear, or that you're stressed, or that you're overjoyed, or anything like that? Of course I can. I can't see body language, I can't see facial expressions, I can't make eye contact. But our conversation is taking place in real time. We are just not physically present together. So this is no longer asynchronous. Phone calls and face-to-face are synchronous message exchanging things. So all I want to do was talk to you about media richness, the fact that we have this broad span of channels that we can choose. And some of them are relatively worthless. And the reason I say relatively worthless, if you simply post a notice, whether it's on Facebook or a bulletin board or whatever, or on somebody's windshield in a parking lot, or just anything that you choose to do, it's you have absolutely no assurance that the message will even be received. It may just simply be ignored or discarded or never read. Similarly, if you send a letter or an email, whether your correspondent responds or not, I don't want to say is irrelevant, but you at least have a written record. You have documentation of what you said and when you said it. And that sometimes is very important, especially in the business context. And then, of course, as we push this thing farther, as we get to richer channels, and that's what this is about. This is about media richness. As we push this thing farther to the right, optimally, the best possible situation is face-to-face. We are together in real time. But second to that would be any sort of a phone conversation that we have, where we speak. We're not in the same place at the same time, but we speak in real time. So again, media richness, the channel that you choose is driven by the nature of the message. If it's really important, like my proposal to Rachel, honey, I hope you're okay. I didn't mean to traumatize you. I should have emailed you and told you I was going to do that. But until I looked at the roster, I had no idea who I was going to choose as my life mate. So, it is the nature of the message that dictates the channel. A lot of things are great. If you simply send them by letter, they're great if you send them by email because we can share them, we can circulate them. Sometimes we need to talk for clarification. Sometimes we need to meet face to face. We're talking about channels and their relative richness. And the choice of a channel is driven by the message. Now, I'm on 593 in the text, and I'm going to lose this because I probably would be using the board for other things. So now there's a discussion in the text, again begins on 593, about barriers to good communication. And my goodness, there are so many. The first thing that the authors talk about are physical barriers. And they're talking about time and space, and they actually introduce sound as a physical barrier. If you yell at me and I don't hear you, I think a great example of a physical barrier is the way any of us arrange our office furniture. There's a standard format or protocol for offices here in the Parker College, and you walked into faculty offices, and what you will almost invariably see is you walk in and there is a desk between you and the faculty member. And along the walls there are file cabinets or bookcases or both. Because I'm a maverick, and that pleases me a great deal, I will not be pushed into that box. If you walk into my office this fall when we get back on campus, you'll see that it's always arranged as an L. When you walk in, there's nothing between you and me. There are some chairs for you to sit. There's a workstation. The desk is in front of me and the computer is to my left. But the point is that desks are barriers. They're meant to put distance between us. And I think that's unfortunate, but there are oftentimes physical barriers to good communication. And right now I'm talking about space. Think about time. What if I have to interact with a company that's based in the People's Republic of California? Yeah. Not only are they on a different planet, they're in a different time zone. Yes. So if it's 1 o'clock here, as it is, it's 10 o'clock there, and many of their businesses have only been open for an hour. I've been at work for 4 hours, which is no big deal. But my point is that we have these spatial barriers, these physical time, space, and sound barriers. The next topic that they take up on barriers to communication is just enormous in its breadth and in its implications. And what they talk about are personal dynamics. Here's Q1. How good are my communication skills? Am I thoughtful? Can I literally craft a message that is sensible? Can I transmit it? Can I listen to you in terms of feedback or acknowledgement or requests for clarification? I know people with superb communication skills, and I know people who have the communication skills of a rock. And I'll bet you do too. Yeah. How about trustworthiness? We're talking about personal dynamics that can either facilitate or impair communications. How about trustworthiness? What if you came to my office and you judged me because we had some time together, some prior experiences? You judged me to be trustworthy. If you judge me worthy of your trust, what you will do comfortably is you'll be vulnerable. By that I mean you'll reveal vulnerabilities to me, whatever they may be, because you know that I'm not going to be opportunistic. I'm not going to take advantage of that. What if I'm not trustworthy? What if we have no history? Or I've done something in the past that really disappointed you? You're not going to speak to me authentically. You'll be guarded and distant, won't you? So this notion about trustworthiness is a pretty big deal. And although trust can simply come from our own risk-taking propensities, some of us have a very, very high tolerance for risk. Some of us have a low tolerance for risk. That is a trait. It's baked in, and it doesn't usually change. But the reality is that most trust comes from a history effect. You and I have had multiple interactions, and let's pretend that it's the two of us, and I have made promises to you that I've kept on a regular basis. So if I tell you that I'll do something and I do it, then I am credible, and that builds trust. And at some point you're going to say, this Norton guy is trustworthy. I can trust him. I can expose myself in the sense of sharing vulnerabilities or weaknesses or concerns or whatever the case may be. But trustworthiness is a very, very big deal when it comes to personal dynamics. If you don't trust someone, your message is not going to be complete or authentic. It's going to be guarded. You're going to withhold something. The third thing that they talk about generational differences. I want to share a thought with you that's actually empirical. I have data. I have, for my entire time here, tried to go to all 4 of the major career fairs every year. I go to both of the STEM fairs and both of the Eagle Expos. I sometimes meet the firms for the accounting kids. I sometimes make the logistics roundtable, but I always go to the big 4. Now, I go there for the entire time, 3 or 4 hours at a time, and I don't go there to watch you. I'm not the sheriff. If you go to a career fair, that's for your benefit. I go there to talk to recruiters. And I probably talk at every single career fair, I probably talk to at least 10 or 12, because my conversations are 10, 15 minutes long with each of them. Fundamentally, I'm trying to get answers to 2 questions. Here's the first question. What are our students do that pleases you? And Q2, what are our kids do that you find distressing? All right, so I have data. I have notes from more than 600 interviews in my office. And the results are that 4 out of every 5 recruiters that I talk to, 80% of the recruiters that I talk to at our college career fairs tell me that their single biggest disappointment would be your social skills. And without me asking, without me volunteering, without me leading, without me prompting, they inevitably say, and it's because generationally, these young people over-rely on tech to communicate. You and I have both seen people standing 4 feet apart texting each other. Are you kidding me? Stop it. Lack of social skills means that you don't engage in sort of a free-rolling exchange conversation. It means that you're awkward when it comes to eye contact. It means that you don't pick up on social cues, because you don't get any social cues with a glowing Pop-Tart in your hand. Again, I think that I talked earlier, I used this as one of my attendance verification questions about style switching. And again, if you take any upper division classes from me when school is back in session in the fall or any other time, I always embed a 2.5 or 3-day career days module. And we talk about style switching because I want you to be comfortable with your friends who are your peers, but when you're talking to people in organizational settings, they're not your peers, they're not your buddies, they don't care what's on your playlist, they don't care that you were SAE. They're looking at you somewhat critically. If I hire you, what contribution are you going to make? So the point is that you have to learn to style switch the moment you even start a job search. And then of course that'll be true for probably your entire time in an organizational setting until you've been there 10 or 12 years and you actually, you're an embedded member of that community. You have domain knowledge, you have history, you have maturity that you don't have as a 19 or 20-year-old kid. Certainly I didn't. I was as worthless as shrimp lips until I went in the Army, and then things changed pretty dramatically. Again, I'm not going to beat to death this thing about generational differences, but when you talk to your peers, you can talk to your peers any way you want. But when you talk to people who are older than you are, different generationally, or even people who are 10 or 12 years older in organizational settings, they don't look at life through the same lens that you do. You have to understand that, and you have to essentially match their expectations, or you don't get the job. Gee, how easy was that? So, now they talk, this is a new topic, a barrier to good communication. Now they talk about cultural barriers. The reality is, I think that even within this magnificent nation of ours, there are lots of groups. When I say lots of groups, I mean very pure forms of tribalism. If you're an environmentalist, that's the drum that you beat. And if I drive a truck with a V8, you think I'm evil. Well, it turns out I'm not, but that's your view of the world, not one that I share. So my point is that even inside this great nation of ours, we have lots of groups because people sort of coalesce around some shared purpose, and that tends to push aside other individual considerations. You are one of us or you are not. That's a big deal. And my goodness, if you think about differences internationally, differences in language and custom and theology. When I say theology, there are a lot of theocracies in the world where Islamic law, Sharia, literally is the governing document. And that creates all sorts of problems for freedom seekers like us. So my point is that we talk about cultural barriers. This is not just us interacting with people from different nations. This is us dealing with wide open throttled tribalism in this country. Still on barriers. Barriers to good communication. Non-verbal communication. And it talks specifically about 4 things: eye contact, facial expressions, body language, and sort of the spatial and touch relationships. Let me start with that. I don't fit very well in the COVID-19 world because I'm not socially distant. I'm a handshaker and I'm a hugger. I hug my men friends. I want to greet you warmly. I want you to know that I'm excited to be with you. I welcome this opportunity for us to interact. I'm not distant. I don't stand off. Now, if you want to be hugged, I'll pick up on that pretty quickly, but very few people are uncomfortable with handshakes. My point is, though, that this spatial thing, if I see you reach for me, I'm going to hug you, and we're pretty comfortable with that. If I reach to hug you and I see you stiffen up, clearly I have intruded into your personal space. You don't want me hugging you, and I'm a big enough kid to figure that out. And the same thing about touching. A great deal of touching is innocent, and some touching isn't, and it's hard for me to know in advance what those boundaries are. I know my own rules are pretty straightforward and pretty innocent. But if you think about nonverbal communication, the spatial thing, I've leaned in to talk to people and they'll back up as if there's some metal rod between us and I can't get any closer than that metal rod. I'm okay with that, but I promise you our conversation is going to end quickly. If you don't want to engage me, that's fine. I've got plenty of places I can take my intellectual energy. So, eyes. Think about this. In the United States, if you don't make eye contact with someone, we think that you're trying to hide something, that you're somehow devious. Now, you could be shy, you could be nervous, but if you can't make eye contact with someone, people will say to themselves, why is this person avoiding me? And yet, in other countries, eye contact is almost forbidden. Like if you look at the culture, for example, in Japan, there's enormous deference to people based on age, and you do not make eye contact, you look at the floor and you bow. No eye contact there. So my point is that in this country, we expect eye contact, not something that's weird or goofy, but just some comfortable level of engagement. And if we don't get that from our conversational partners, we worry more about them than about us. Facial expressions. Some are obvious if we're really upset or if we're really excited or full of joy or something like that. But a lot of facial expressions are not, they're not instructive. For example, if I'm simply listening to you, I might scrunch up my face because I'm just paying attention. I don't want to miss anything you have to say. That doesn't suggest that I'm angry or mean or anything else. It means I'm focused. Well, what if you don't interpret it that way? I don't have an answer to that. But my point is these are all nonverbal cues. And we get the thing about body language. There are a lot of things like right at this moment, I didn't realize it until I started to speak about it, but my feet are spread a little bit farther apart than my shoulders, and I'm leaning forward. I'm leaning in. I'm engaging this silly machine, this iPad Mini, as a very poor substitute for you. But my point is, I'm leaning forward. I'm engaged. What if, and I've seen this lots of times, people lean back, they cross their legs, they fold their arms across their chest, and they're frozen. Okay, I'm not working with a good conversational partner. She or he doesn't want to be part of this. So my point is, body language sends messages. What if I were in a meeting, a group, and I just sat there holding my head? Would you think I'm upset with you? Would you think I'm hungover? Is it possible I was up with a sick child all of last night and I'm exhausted? I don't know. But that message, if I'm in a meeting, instead of being engaged, if I'm holding my head, or heaven forbid, I'm doing something stupid like scrolling on my Pop-Tart or whatever the case may be. This thing about nonverbal communication sends cues. And it tells us if someone is engaged and comfortable with us or not. Whether it's the spatial thing or the body language or eye contact or whatever. Now, there's a discussion here about gender differences in communication, and they make an argument in the text that I just think is vacuous. I don't think it describes anything I've ever seen in the military or in business or in academia in 7+ decades. What they say is that women and men communicate very differently. I don't think that's even remotely true. But again, that is experiential. There is no science whatsoever to suggest that there are gender differences. When I first became a member of the academic community, I was keenly interested in these special topics. For example, the majority, 70% or more of my research has been in entrepreneurship, and the other 30% has been in leadership and ethics. And the truth is, those are two domains that have that have shared components. So early in my career, I would read all these papers that would try to find differences between female entrepreneurs and male, between female leaders and male leaders. They don't exist. Women ascend to leadership roles and perform extraordinarily all over the world for my entire lifetime. Golda Meir was the Prime Minister of Israel, who successfully beat the crap out of Arab nations that tried to invade her nation. Margaret Thatcher was the Prime Minister of England for 12 years, a remarkable woman, just remarkable in so many dimensions. The last 3 administrations, I'm not counting our sitting president, Trump, but the last 3 administrations, Bush 43, Clinton, and Obama, those 3 administrations have all had female heads of state. Female secretaries of state. There are female governors all over the United States, members of Congress, CEOs, major companies, tech giants like HP and IBM, and enormous consumer products companies like PepsiCo and people like that. There are no discernible, detectable differences between the way women and men lead or manage or make decisions or communicate. Why people try to beat that drum is a mystery to me. Because I've been studying the science for more than 25 years. We can't discern any differences between them. So anything people say is some personal, uninformed opinion. I get it that there are biological differences between us. I also get it that we are socialized. Now this is as children, this is not as adults. But as children, we're socialized in very different ways. For example, little girls play with dolls. How charming. Little boys don't play with dolls. They play with action figures. Heck yeah. G.I. Joe, The Rock. Come on, they're dolls. Or the girls have action figures. We simply call them different things because we socialize them in different ways. But at what point does your socialization stop and you start making your own decisions about growth and development? What would that be, 13, 14, 15, somewhere in there? You still have boundaries imposed by your parents, as you should, but you make a lot of your own decisions about what matters to you, what you value, what you don't like. So my point is that socialization only impacts us when we're short kids. By the time we're young adolescents, we start to develop into whatever neat beings we're going to become. It's a long journey. I don't think I finished yet. But my only point is that there's virtually no science in my domains, leadership, entrepreneurship, or anything like that, that suggests that women and men make decisions differently, are more or less successful, lead in different ways. People make those arguments on a regular basis, but they're simply opinions. And opinions have no value unless you're buying something as a consumer or voting. Opinions are not informed judgments, they're opinions. I like blue cars. I can't tell you why. And who gives a crap if I like blue cars? That's an opinion, isn't it? The only time that has any bearing is if I'm buying a new car, or perhaps a used one. But opinions are just that. They're positions that are unsupported, that have no merit, that are difficult to explain. An informed judgment comes from a great deal of education or training or experience. That's different. An informed judgment is very different from an opinion. But that was a useful distinction. Now, I'm on 600, and the authors start talking about social media because it's a big part of communication. I want to share an observation with you. I actually think that we should not call social media, we should call it anti-social media. And the reason I say that is if you use social media platforms, any of them, that permits you to avoid all human interaction, which means you build zero relationships. I've met people that don't want to talk to others. If they could call Land's End to place an order for something, they're not going to do it because, heaven forbid, they'd have to talk to a human being. They want to pull up a monitor and bang on a keyboard and not have any direct human interaction. That's why I believe we should call social media anti-social media, because that is precisely what it is and what it does. It permits the user to avoid all human interaction, and that is not healthy, because you don't build relationships or social skills or anything else. And I'd also point out, and this is simply an observation, this is not in the textbook, when I talk about the value of building relationships, I don't know if you've had this conversation before, but I often hear people of all ages say, it's all who you know. And loved ones, that is precisely backwards. It's who knows you. Do I know you? Do I think highly of you? If I do, I will be your advocate. I will mentor you. I'll be your champion. I'll kick open doors. I'll pick up the phone and make calls and say, you need to look at this kid for that job, or whatever the case may be. But if you don't invest any time building relationships, no one knows you. It's never who you know, it's who knows you. So if you don't have strong relationships with people that are 12, 15, or more years older than you, start building them. Start investing time. Start having these direct human interactions, because every second that you spend in a digital world banging on your little machine is a second that you do not spend in the real world interacting with people and building relationships. And then the last thing that, I don't remember if this is my observation or if this is in the text. Forgive my poor memory. Again, this might be my observation. It might have been something I pulled out of the text. I'm still in this discussion of social media, and we're not going to leave it quite yet. A disproportionate number of social media messages or postings, I would be kind if I said that they are trivial and non-significant. LOL. One of my colleagues, Treasurer, the guy's one of the hospitality faculty, has a daughter who's a college student somewhere. I don't remember if she's in Atlanta, Athens, but she's not here. And the family was together recently, and they'd gone out for a meal, and she stopped everyone when the food was delivered, and she said, oh, no, the phone eats first. I hope that I never get a photo from you with a caption that says, oh, look at my amazing pancakes. If you think that way, please, I will bring you to my house. I'll show you how to make the batter. It's eggs, oil, flour, a little bit of milk. I'll show you when to flip the pancakes so that they're golden brown and not undercooked or crusty on the outside. Pancakes are not amazing. Pancakes are pancakes. So the point that I'm making, and again, I'm embarrassed that I can't say that I took this out of the text. This might be an observation that I'm making. A disproportionate number of social media messages, whether they're posted or whatever the case may be, are literally so insignificant, so trivial, that I just think to myself, this person is an oxygen thief. Makes no contribution anywhere, just sitting there converting oxygen into carbon dioxide. That's an oxygen thief. Yeah. So now I'm on 608, and the textbook talks about the downsides of social media. And I'm going to start with me. The first thing they talk about is cyber loafing. Oh dear. Typically, there are exceptions to what I'm about to say, but typically, I eat my lunch at my desk, and it may be 20, 30 minutes, and I have a couple of packs of crackers and either a protein drink or sometimes a Diet Coca-Cola. Yes, we know how to speak Southern around here. And that's called cyber loafing, isn't it? Well, I'm on my lunch hour, and I don't feel any obligation to work, so I'll pull up YouTube and watch videos about Sig Sauer pistols or a lot of cool music stuff, Gamazda, a Russian pianist, just all sorts of things. I'm interested in aviation and boats and Harleys and a million things like that. So I make putts around on YouTube, just viewing things that engage me. I almost always, at least once a day, I will quickly hit 3 news feeds. I'll go to Fox News, Yahoo, and MSN. And I do that because I get very different perspectives, and I want to be well informed. So my point is that I am literally cyber loafing. Now, I'm doing it on my lunch hour, but my point is I'm sitting at an employer-provided computer screwing off, highly technical term. How many people cyber loaf at work? Are you kidding me? Cyber security, I have no words. I used to try to, when I would make this presentation, put together a list of recent compromises, recent breaches, and the list became so long that it was unmanageable. The Office of Personnel Management, lots of retailers like Lowe's and Home Depot, major banks, JP Morgan. It's stunning to me. Credit reporting agencies like Equifax, Anthem, the big insurance company. When we were, I don't know if this was my first appointment at Indiana University or my subsequent appointment at Louisville, but I was covered by Anthem, and there was a data breach. And what Anthem has done since that day is they pay a company called All Clear ID to monitor all credit generated in my name, my daughter's name, and my wife's name. We get a report once a month, or if somebody makes an inquiry, we get a text or a phone call or an email that hour. And it will say something like, someone just tried to open an account at Renaissance Bank, was that you? So my point is that Anthem, because I'm still covered by a Blue Cross Blue Shield product here in the University System of Georgia, Anthem is literally paying for this identity theft protection for 3 members of my family, and I promise you, I think it's sufficiently important that if they weren't paying for it, I would. It's something like $8 a month. Are you kidding me? $100 a year to make sure that nobody is opening accounts in your name, stealing from you, compromising your credit. Are you kidding me? So my point is that cybersecurity and this whole notion of privacy and things like that, they're just enormously big problems. And even though we have a lot of people who are strong on the tech side, we don't have a lot of good solutions because we have too many people launching attacks on a regular basis. Oftentimes when it comes to privacy and identity theft, you and I, are our own worst enemies because we post all kinds of dumb stuff that tells people that we're away. I've got friends that I can just pick up my wife's Facebook account and scroll through it, and I can tell you if the Whiteman family is at their condo in Myrtle Beach. Well, if they're there, they're not at their home here in Bullitt County, correct? Here's a story that's not fun, and it predates social media and cyber theft, but I practiced in Atlanta as a CPA for 17 years, and for a goodly portion of that time, maybe 10 or 11 years or more, I guess about 10 or 11, I had an office in Roswell. I owned an office condominium right off of Holcomb Bridge Road. And I had friends and clients who told me of an unfortunate theft. They received in the mail, this is a married couple, their children were grown and gone. They received in the mail theater tickets for a show that was upcoming, along with a note that said, enjoy the show, a friend. And they thought, how cool is that? Didn't know who sent them the tickets. So they go to the show, whatever it was, next Friday night from 7:30 to 10. And they come home and their house has been ransacked. All the electronics are gone, guns, jewelry, whatever cash was laying around, other things were damaged. Now, a goodly portion of it was covered by insurance. But why did that happen between 7:30 and 10 on that Friday night? Because the thief knew that they would be in a theater and not at home. But my point is, on this privacy and identity theft thing, oftentimes we give the bad guys all kinds of intel about us. We make postings and all sorts of things about where we are, what we're doing, and that's it's fairly easy to build a profile, isn't it? So just be sensitive to that, please. And now the newest iPhone. I want to make sure that you know this. This is a flip phone. Yes, it's 4th gen, so it's pretty high tech. Because 5th gen hasn't yet taken place. We're rolling it out, but my flip phone is voice only, and for that reason, I use it as a communication device. I talk to people. I do not need to watch Little Women of LA or Project Runway or other dumb stuff on my flip phone. It's not an entertainment device, it is a communication device. So both of my girls, my wife and my daughter, have not current generation, but late generation iPhones. And I believe that the newest one, is it the 10 or the 11, requires facial recognition to unlock? Are you kidding me? That means that the facial rec stuff is up on the cloud somewhere, and whom do you think can access that? Anybody that wants to. That's a pretty smart tech guy or tech girl, and my goodness, there are so many devious, evil people out there. So my point is that we oftentimes lay ourselves bare. We expose ourselves, and we tend to pay a price for it. So now, gosh, I'm not sure on the page number, and I apologize. This would be somewhere around 600, 608, somewhere around 610. There's a discussion about email, and I want you to know that email is inescapable. And I've heard young people say email is for old people, okay? Because we, the cool kids, we text. Okay, excuse me. An email is a text message that is typically sent between computers. A text message is a text message that's often sent from mobile device to mobile device. There is no difference, none. So I want to share with you what is a useful decision rule. I send and receive a lot of emails. I'm reading and responding to about 1,000 emails a week right now just from attendance verification. I have 105 kids and I teach 10 classes a week, so every class requires an attendance verification. So I'm really serious. I'm reading and responding to 1,000 emails just on attendance verification. That doesn't count all the dumb stuff the university sends me or the important things that I get, like if Ruger is launching a new firearm or something really important like that. And yes, my wife and I have reserved the new Bronco. You couldn't know this, but my wife likes distinctive vehicles. Her daily driver is a pristine collector grade 89 Bronco 2. And we have reserved a spot for the 2021 Broncos. We won't even be able to sit down at the Ford store until about October, November to literally identify colors and packages and options. But we're in line with probably a couple of 100,000 other people. But here's my decision rule on emails, and you will send and receive lots of them in business because that's how information flows in business. It may in your personal lives as well, but my decision rule is if a message is going to be any of three things, if it's going to be complex or long or emotional, email is the wrong channel. You don't have to adopt my decision rules, but I can promise you that works well for me. I do not use email as a communication channel, as a medium to deliver a message if my message is going to be complex or long or emotional. I will choose a richer medium. Now, in some cases, that may mean that I send a long letter or a big document. Would you agree? Because that way I can lay out the specifics, the details, the challenges, whatever the case may be. And there's documentation that permits you to read it, reflect on it, and develop a thoughtful response. Because emails usually suggest some sort of urgency. Get back to me quickly. That's a suggestion and only then. But email is inescapable because that is how business literally circulates and transmits information. Texting. I'm on 612 right now, and I literally want to share with you the textbook presents 5 decision rules for texting, and let me find it on page 612. Let us hope that my notes are correct. My preacher is much better at this than I am. All right, I'm on 612, and here's what the topical sentence says. It says, here are a few tips for making the most of texting for work purposes. And these are just suggestions, but my goodness, they're productive. Strictly limit your use for personal reasons during the workday. You're being paid to work, not to deal with a girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever the case may be. Text only important messages and make it clear why your message is urgent. Pancakes are not amazing. Yeah. Avoid texting during meetings. I can't even, I have no words for that. I know many organizations that literally will put a basket on a conference table, and when you walk into a meeting, you drop your phone or your tablet or whatever other device you have there. Because many people, sadly, have the attention span of a goldfish, which is probably something like 0.8 of a second. So many companies, it's just impermissible. Drop your phone in a basket, pick it up when you leave. If you've got something going on, if you have a family member in a hospital, or your wife is in her 40th week of pregnancy, or anything like that, of course we're going to be accommodative. I am in class. But my point is, using any sort of a communication device during a meeting is it just suggests that you are dumber than a rock. And that doesn't bode well for your progression or retention in that organization, does it? If you show other people that you're stupid and shallow and self-absorbed and disrespectful, not the message that you want to send, is it? Don't use abbreviations or emojis, and it says like OMG, BTW, and then the whole emoji thing is simply stupid in ways I can't describe. I have no words. Where do they come from? They need to go back. But we're talking about use of texting in the context of businesses, of organizations. Clearly, you can do in your personal life whatever you think is right. And they point out that we should always proofread before we hit send. Heck yes. Heck yes. Not just for autocorrect stuff, but to make sure that we didn't drop a word, make sure that the message is clear. You know that thing about the components of communication? The sender encodes a message and transmits it. That's on you if you're the sender. Transmit a message, or rather encode a message that is interpretable on the other end. Something that makes sense, something that is complete and accurate. But again, I thought that was sufficiently important that I wanted to read those 5 rules with you. Oh, I'm going to continue on, and this is on the next page. See, never took my glasses off. I'm on 613 right now. Table 15A, 7 elements of an effective social media policy. I don't think it's likely that you as an early career employee will be developing policy for the use of social media in your business, but hands down, you'll be accountable to follow this policy if that is what your company has. And these are the author's perspectives, 7 elements of a good policy. They say things like, in a work context, identify sites that employees may use. My wife's firm does not permit anybody in a work setting to go to any sporting website. Like you couldn't go follow the Dallas Cowboys or go to ESPN or anything like that. And they have plenty of other prohibitions. Inform employees of the terms of use and conditions. Identify who speaks for the company and for what purpose. It's I'm going to talk briefly about Elon Musk. The only people who don't know anything about his behavior have lived on a raft in the South Pacific for the last 17 years. Yeah. Elon Musk is a loose cannon, and I'm being very kind to him. People think he's a visionary. I think he's a moron, but that's a different conversation. But Musk got in a great deal of trouble with the Securities and Exchange Commission a few months ago because he tweeted, taking Tesla private at $4.20 a share, funding secured. This is the CEO and founder of Tesla. Taking Tesla, a publicly held company since maybe 2003, something like 17 years or so. So it's accountable to these regulatory agencies. So he sends out a tweet, taking Tesla private. We're going to delist it at $4.20 a share. He's specific about the share price, period. Funding secured, period. None of that was true. So the SEC had to duck. And there were criminal charges brought against him for this misrepresentation thing. And he ended up paying a big fine. To him it was trivial, but to the rest of us it'd be big. It was a $20 million fine for his bad behavior. And he was forced to step away from the chairmanship of Tesla. He's still the chief executive officer, but he held both roles before. And he's got some other limitations. But the reason that I'm talking to you about Elon Musk and this particular thing where it says, identify who speaks for the company and for what purposes, as part of that criminal proceeding, the agreement that the SEC made with Elon Musk and Tesla is he would tweet nothing unless someone in the organization, and they actually named someone, I think it was somebody, perhaps general counsel or something, unless someone in the organization reviewed the tweet and approved it before he hit send. Because on many dimensions of his life, he's an adolescent child. So my point is that one of the most visible CEOs in the nation is under an SEC order to not send out any tweets until somebody else in the organization approves it. So that's the question. Who speaks for this organization and for what purpose? If I write if I write an opinion piece and I send it to the Savannah Morning News, I'm not speaking for Georgia Southern. I'm speaking for Bill Norton, and I make that abundantly clear. It may be obvious that my work affiliation is at this university, but I'm not a spokesman for the university. I'm employed here, but that's a clear boundary. Clarify the distinction between personal and work-related posts. And what it says remind employees that their personal posts can affect their professional lives. Are you kidding me? I'm actually stunned at the poor judgment I see on a regular basis. Recently, in the last 2 or 3 weeks, there was a woman, she was a Harvard graduate, some worthless degree like government or gender studies or something like that. And she'd taken a position at Deloitte, one of the big 4 accounting firms. And I don't know what she was going to do there, but she had a job at Deloitte. And as part of the political activism that's taken this country by storm for the last few weeks, she posted something on a social media platform that said, if you say all lives matter, I'm going to stab you. Okay, that was pretty poor judgment. Well, Deloitte terminated her. And she said, oh, that isn't fair. You make a threat that clear, if you say all lives matter to me, I'm going to push a knife between your ribs. So my point is that this notion, this distinction between personal posts and business-related posts should be so clear. But oftentimes, the stuff that people do personally impacts their work life. I know of a woman here in Bullock County. She was a teacher in the public school system. Bullock County has a prohibition. Everybody signs this as part of their employment contract or whatever, and it says, I won't post any pictures of me drinking alcohol or whatever the specific verbiage is. This woman, as I understand it, was at a barbecue at a friend's house. She was in a picture. She was in the background, but she was in a picture holding a red Solo cup. She was terminated. Now, is it possible she had Diet Coke in that cup or sweet tea or 100 other things? It is. But she was terminated because she violated a policy that the Board of Education has that says don't do anything that gives the impression that our staff and faculty are out there drinking publicly. And there was her appeal did not meet with any success. So my point is you have to make a clear distinction. If it's personal, make sure it's personal. Do not somehow mingle or confuse your professional life with your personal life. Keep them separate and distinct. Confidentiality is a big thing. Professional behavior online. Discourage anonymous posts. Specify the consequences of violations. These are simply elements of a social media policy. And the reality is you'll probably find yourself in a situation, your first job or any subsequent jobs, where your company has one, you're expected to read it and comply, to adhere to it. So this is not something bizarre or unusual. This is an everyday, every organization sort of an event. Now, I'm on 615, and there's a discussion about hostile communications which promote like a defensive response. And the message is, make every effort you can to be sort of neutral in terms of your tone. You really always, I just said that, that's an absolute. You really need to avoid absolutes, like always and never. You always screw up. You never get anything done on time. Is that hostile? Is that going to create a defensive response? It is. And it's a bad strategy. And it's likely we all devolve to that at some point. But I want you to make a conscious effort not to create, not to launch a message that is hostile, because that will be met with a defensive response at minimally and maybe something more. And now it talks about, and I love this, it talks about empathy. I'm on 617. Empathy is the ability, this is a definition given in the text, it's the ability to recognize and understand another person's position or perspective or needs. I would hope that I am empathetic on a regular basis. I would hope that that is the case. It's certainly my goal, and I just perhaps come up short sometimes, but I know my heart. Because oftentimes you will have needs that don't neatly fit into the university structure. But being empathetic is a very big deal, because people that aren't empathetic are psychopaths. Yes, that's true. That's one of the characteristics, one of the attributes of psychopathy, is the complete lack of empathy. Okay, so I don't want to be a psychopath. And empathy clearly is rooted in humility. If indeed I am humble, I will always put your needs first. I will not take credit or do things that benefit myself. If indeed I am, I will put your needs first. So my point is that empathy is rooted in humility. And if those two exist, you're probably on a pretty good path in life. And if they aren't, you need to develop them. You need to work on them. Now, I'm on page 619, being an effective writer. A lot of powerful things there. Start with your purpose. Don't make me go more than 3 or 4 sentences before I have a clear sense for what you want to accomplish. We are urged in the text in table 1511 to write simply. One of the reasons that Papa Hemingway, one of the reasons that Ernest Hemingway is such a well-regarded writer, his works were written 100 years ago in some cases. Some of his books were published, Sun Also Rises, 1924, I think. He's been dead for decades, but Hemingway's works endure because he writes so well. And Hemingway writes in simple, declarative sentences. Hemingway would say, I ate breakfast. He wouldn't say, I woke up with a light heart, and I went to the kitchen and I prepared a souffle. I ate breakfast. A simple declarative sentence. We, the readers, do not get lost in the message. I can promise you, because writing is a big part of my day job and has been for 30 years, I'm capable of writing well, but I have to put an enormous effort into it. And every single time that I simplify a message, it's cleaner, it's more crisp, it has less potential to be misunderstood. So I'm a big fan of simple declarative sentences. I don't put all these flowery qualifiers or preconditions or whatever. I don't write long, complex, compound sentences. Writing simply is virtuous. We are told to watch emotions. Let me tell you something I do. This is particularly if I'm writing a response to something that has distressed me. It could be an email or it could be a letter. But if it's an email, I don't hit reply and then start to craft the email. I write an email to Bill Norton at his personal residence. I craft an email to myself. So if I accidentally hit send or do anything else, I haven't done anything that I later regret. And the point is, I can craft this email, send it to myself, read it and think, you know, that is precisely what I wanted to say. Or I need to soften it, or I need to sharpen it. But the point is that if you simply put this buffer, whatever your buffer happens to be, if you build in some sort of a lag, if you're responding to something that has distressed you, you will never regret that decision. And you may send a crisp message, because it's entirely possible a crisp message needs to be delivered. But you won't do it because you did it angrily, or in anger, or thoughtlessly, or whatever the case may be. Never, this is number 4, never ignore basic composition or syntax, never. There's no situation where that plays well in an organizational setting, none. I will never forget a transmittal letter that I got many years ago when I was still practicing in Atlanta. I'd read the kid's resume, good school, good GPA, did the right stuff. And then I get to the transmittal letter, and the transmittal letter in the second paragraph started out with, "I done real good in school." Actually, you didn't. And I sent the transmittal letter and the resume right to the shredder. Didn't even finish reading the letter. I can promise you, because I talk to hundreds of recruiters every year, I can promise you that people in HR, people who recruit candidates to be considered for positions in organizations, literally use a decision heuristic called EBA. It's elimination by aspect. And what they're doing is if they find any aspect that does not meet their standards, they dump the candidate. If, for example, I'm hiring and I say, I need someone with a degree in mechanical engineering, your degree is in business or math or something else, you don't match up with my criteria, do you? So I eliminate you. I eliminate you because you don't meet the criterion of education. Now, another criterion that I can promise you recruiters invoke every single time they read a resume, they are actively looking for sloppiness, for bad syntax, bad composition. For example, if you have any work experience, if you're still working somewhere, the recruiters expect to see present tense verbs. Work with young children in this context. If you had a job in the past, they expect to see past tense verbs. If you throw that away, your resume is going to get thrown away. You can never, ever ignore basic rules of composition or syntax. Never, because that will immediately purge you from consideration. So don't ever make that mistake. And what that may mean is you may need someone to proofread the letter, or whatever it is for you. It's always a smart thing to do. So now I'm on 620, and we're talking about effective speaking, and they start out by saying, do significant preparation. If you're going to make a presentation and it requires any technology, first of all, test it and decide on alternate paths. What I'm about to say doesn't make me special or important, but every single semester, a few days before the semester begins, I'll go to the classrooms to which I'm assigned, and I'll test the projection tech and the consoles and everything else. Generally, I find it to be fine, but I've also come in here and people have pulled cables out of the back because they were, linking up their own laptops or whatever, and they did not put it back together. So my point is, prep is a big deal. So if you're going to use any technology to prepare, test it and come up with alternative sources. I often will make PowerPoint presentations. I find other ways to do that. I can give you hard copy. I can put on the whiteboard. But my point is, I can't be lost if the projection tech doesn't work, or if a laptop crashes or whatever. That should never end my presentation. It talks about rehearsals. especially with respect to timing. Yes. How much time do you have? In a classroom setting, I will often have you for an hour 15. I'm not going to have that in any kind of a business setting. People are going to expect the message to be concise, powerful, short, and then they want to be able to interact, ask questions, to resolve concerns, or whatever the case may be. So you have to rehearse, you have to practice it, and you have to make sure that you have a reasonable handle for time. What if somebody said to you in the middle of a presentation, we're down to 4 minutes? Could you adapt? Could you deliver the rest of the material in that length of time? I don't really know, but you have to be sensitive to that. The only way you learn is to rehearse and to time it. Now it talks about audience. To whom am I making this presentation? Am I making this to a group of people who are eager to be here or not? Yeah. What is my audience? Are they technically aware? Are they middle schoolers and I'm talking to them about college and careers? Am I talking to, here's an example of an audience that I think usually values the presentation and pays attention. I've shared this with you before. In all my upper division classes, if they're populated with seniors, I always build in a 2.5 or 3 day career day module. Well, I don't benefit. I have 3 degrees and a great job, but all y'all are looking to start your careers. So most of you sit there and you don't blink because you don't want to miss anything. You take notes. You can often give back to me what I said in different segments of it because we'll have conversations in my office. And of course, we'll have to wear the masks now. I want you to know that. So my point is, who's the audience? Are these people engaged? Do they want to be here? Are they competent in the domain, or are they babes in the woods? Are they more experienced than I am? Are they interested in the technical merits of a presentation? Do they want some vision, a sense of direction? Do they want an analysis of problems? Who is the audience? What is their motivation for being there? And how closely is your presentation going to match up with their expectations? It's a big deal. You absolutely need to be able to demonstrate competence. Absolutely. That tends to show quickly. Here's a quick anecdote. When I returned from Vietnam, I was a first lieutenant with, I guess about 6 or 8 months in grade, so I was going to be promoted to captain for a while. And I was assigned to the infantry school at Fort Benning as a resident instructor. On a regular basis, I would present land nav topics to the infantry officers advanced course. That's made up of career officers who are captains and majors. Every single student in the room outranked me. And I wasn't the least bit uncomfortable with that because I promise you, I had my stuff tightly wrapped before I walked in that room. I knew the domain, I'd rehearsed it, I timed it. I knew many questions to expect because I had more than a modest amount of experience doing this in country. But I once had an officer, I don't remember if he was a captain or a major. I'm in a classroom, kind of like our tiered classrooms here at the Parker College, but it held about 225 people and every seat was full. But I had an officer who outranked me who said, "Why should we listen to you? You're a first lieutenant." And I said to him, thoughtfully but authentically, I said, "Sir," I said, "there are 15 or 20 people in this building that know as much or more as I do about this topic, and none of them are in this room with me." And the other people in the class actually clapped, and we went on. You have to be able to demonstrate competence. You must. It doesn't matter what the nature of your audience is. If you're standing in front of them on some topic, you are presumed to have domain competence. You know more than I do, I wouldn't be sitting there listening to you. So you have to be able to demonstrate competence. That's not very difficult, but you have to do it. And then the last thing I want to say kind of cracks me up. There's a section in the book where we're talking about effective speakers. I don't have the page number down. And it talks about the way you make a presentation. In 1970, when I was first assigned to Benning, I had to go to a 3-week course that was an instructor training course. And there was a senior NCO, a non-commissioned officer, was one of the instructors. And in the military, We are taught to use gestures with the knife end of the hand. It's supposed to add emphasis. And he said, men's? He didn't know that men was a plural pronoun. He said, men's? Tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them, and then tell them what you told them. Intro, body, conclusion. That's exactly what it says in the book. If I'm going to sit in a room and you're going to make a presentation to me, give me an introduction, tell me where we are going. Then introduce and develop the body of the material. Deliver the message. And then tell me what you told me. Just sort of wrap it up in some sort of a concise conclusion. So to make an effective presentation is no different than to write a letter or a good email. Intro, body, conclusion. Tell me what you're going to tell me. Tell me what you told me. All right, we're done. I know it's long and exhausting, but I can tell you're having a great deal of fun. So, today's question for attendance verification. For what purpose does the Norton family use Israeli gas masks? All right, love you. Talk to y'all soon.